Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name's Tim Smith. I'm a senior developer evangelist at Genesys. I've been with the company for 13 years, and I work on our developer center, developer forum, SDKs, and everything else related to the developer community. So today we'll be covering the developer tools. So let me go ahead and get my screen share started. I don't have any PowerPoint slides prepared. We're just going to be walking through the application and give you a live demo. Give it a second for the screen share to come through. All right, Allie, are you seeing the screen share now?
Not yet.
Can you see it now?
I'm not seeing it. Becky can see it.
Okay. All right, just want to make sure everybody can see it before I start talking about it. So the developer tools is an application that we created to help you in your endeavors in building integrations and even just testing out APIs. The premise of it is, that it's a lot of work to develop a test app and do authentication and set everything up just for the purpose of trying out an API or seeing if a notification comes in, or you just want to try and build an analytics query without writing a bunch of code. So the developer tools are a set of tools that help you do those things. The tools that we have available, the API Explorer allows you to test API requests. The code editor actually allows you to write some JavaScript code in your browser and use the JavaScript SDK to make requests. So if you want to try something that's a little more complex than just simply making one request, you can chain a couple things together and actually test that out, writing a little bit of code, but without having to set up anything at all locally. It runs 100% in your browser. We also have a notification tester, so you can subscribe to various notification topics and see those events come in. We have web chats, so you can initiate web chats right from the browser. Just fill in the information that you need to start one and click the button, and it'll start a web chat. That's really useful for testing chats, so you don't have to set up your own web server to host the page just to be able to send a chat through the system. You can also test screen share, create callbacks in the system. The analytics query builder is another big one that lets you design analytics queries in the browser, again, without writing any code, and execute them and see the results. So you can parse through everything just very easily. The search query builder helps you build search requests very much like the analytics query builder. And the application inspector shows you some API usage information relating to a specific OAuth client in your org. So we'll start just navigating the app on the front page. Obviously, it shows you everything here. On the left side, you can use those icons to navigate around as well. And it'll show you your profile picture right here. When you click on it, it gives you the response to the API users me call. So it shows you your user information. This is really helpful to grab your user ID to use in API requests. Your org ID is in here down somewhere at the bottom, I think. Gives you your OAuth client information. So it gives you a lot of information about your user. Just right here, it's available all the time. So you don't have to manually make an API request just to figure out what your user information is. So to start off, let's look at the API Explorer. So this loads the API definition dynamically, and it shows you each of the categories on the left. You can drill down into those and find different API requests. If you know what you're looking for, you can search. So maybe we just want to find some user APIs. So we get a lot more than the user categories because there are other APIs that have to do with users. If we search for something more specific, like content, there's only 2 categories that have some APIs that match that. So let's try out a simple API request. So let's look for users. And down here, we can go find the user me request. And so this loads up a screen telling you about the API. To start off with, at the top, gives you the description and tells you what the API path is, so you know what request you're going to make. tells you what permissions are required for the API and any scopes that may be required. And then any parameters that you have available will allow you to put in the values here. So this resource only allows us the expand parameter. It doesn't have any other path parameters or a request body like a post might. So we can choose to expand something. We can take one of the values that it lists here. Let's expand skills and send the request. When we send it, it pops up down here. And so it tells you the request data. This is what's being sent with the request exactly. And the response tells you the response code. So it was 200, which means it was successful. Gives you all the headers that were returned, so you don't have to look in the network console in your browser or anything. This one's really important, the correlation ID. So if you're working with support or maybe on the developer forum, a lot of times we'll ask for the correlation ID or the context ID for the request. So you can get this value right here in the developer tools. Down here, it returns the body. So like I mentioned before with your profile, this is the same information here that is returned from that API request. So you can see all of it down here. You can even use the collapsers. It highlights all the JSON and formats it very nicely for you. Let's see, we can look at another one. We'll just look at how they're structured. So if you wanted to update a user, we can open that one, and it adds a new tab for that API resource, so you can switch back and forth between them. Again, gives you the resource, and this one has a path parameter here of user ID, which we see right here. So we can put in our user ID. This is a place where you may want to just grab this from your config and paste it in there. You can then edit the JSON in here to make a valid request, whatever it needs to be for the API resource. And then you can send the request. And here we should get, we're going to get an error. Since I didn't fill any of this out, it's not going to work correctly. So even if your request doesn't work, it still shows you the response. We see this one was a 400 bad request, which 400 status codes mean I did something wrong. And we can read the message that tells you what's wrong with it. So it's complaining that I didn't fill something out, which I obviously didn't. So the error message is valid there. All right. So that's the general concept of the API Explorer. Really useful just for trying stuff out. Or even if you have something you want to accomplish, you can just do it in here to make a couple API requests, just a one-off task that you need to do instead of writing an app to do it. So the next tool we have is the code editor. You write your code here on the left, and the console output shows up on the right. So there's a couple examples here, so you can just load something up and test it out. So this is the get current user code, and it uses the SDK to make the request to users me. When we hit run, we see it traces out in the console, traces out the getting me, and then got me, and then the user object. And it's pretty printed out here in the console, which is nice. And then we see done down here. So it traced out all the console messages and the information that we wanted. If we want to edit this, say, well, I don't want to do the whole thing. I just want to welcome this user. I can just edit this code in line. And once I've got it the way I want it, hit the run button, and it clears the console each time you run and then displays the output. So instead of displaying the whole user object, I did that, and I actually want to display the name. There we go. So now it welcomes my user just in the console message. You can make additional API requests and write any code, any JavaScript code you want that'll execute in a browser will work right here. Some of the other examples, you can update your presence. So this one has quite a bit more code because it's running through several things to find different presences and then update the user. There's placing a phone call. So you can put in a phone number here and just hit this to dial it so that you don't have to actually manually write any API request. It just shows you how to do it using the SDK. Also over here is the documentation. So my window's a little small right now, so stuff's cut off. but this is the JavaScript SDK documentation, same stuff that's out on the web page, but we have it embedded here for convenience, so you can write your code on the left-hand side and look at the API documentation on the right-hand side. You can navigate around the different APIs, like pick the user's API, and then find which resource you want to use if you wanted to get user roles, and then look at the example code. You can copy and paste it in there, type it while looking at it. So that's the code editor overview. You can also choose an SDK version. So if you want to choose a specific version, you can go back to an older version if you're trying to test something like, my app is using version 51 and this code works, but it's not working in 64. So you can try different versions to troubleshoot things if you're trying to upgrade versions. All right, so the next tool is the notification tester. So this one, we see the WebSocket heartbeats coming in. As soon as you load the app, it subscribes to a notification channel, and it'll display these heartbeats just to show that the channel's working. The way this works is you subscribe to whatever topics you want, and then it will just dump the raw message body out here into the right-hand side of the screen. There's two buttons up here for shortcuts. If you want to subscribe to your presence, you just click the button, and then you can see what topic it added down here for presence. You can also subscribe to your conversations with a single click, and the rest of the topics are here in the list. So you can choose one and then replace it with whatever identifier you need for that. When you hit the subscribe button, it will subscribe to that topic. Note that's not a valid contact list ID. It still lets you subscribe to it, but you'll never get any events since that's not a real ID. Up here at the top, you can pin notifications if you want, or clear them out. This can get full of events if you're testing things, so clearing it's helpful. Let's open the API Explorer over here. And I'm going to update my presence. So we can look for the presence APIs. We can get a list of the organization's presence definitions. And I'm going to grab a presence ID from one here. And then I'm going to look for the patch user presence, which is under users. Where is that? Nope, not that one. This is what you get for doing live demos. Oh, I know, it's actually in the code editor. We have that update user presence. So let's just run that, see what happens. Okay, so my current presence is this, setting it to this value. So we should see a notification come in on that topic. And we didn't. All right, well, I'll move on. But this is the idea, is that it will show the notifications when you change your presence here. An easy way to do that, just open the UI. And change my presence. All right, so we did see it come in and it changed to available once I logged in. If I change my presence to busy, you see it changed to busy. And I can go change the meal, change to a couple custom break statuses. And we see all these notifications come in here for the different statuses, and heartbeats keep coming in. So you can do this to test out functionality, and you can see, oh, hey, this code didn't work. So you can start troubleshooting it to figure out why you didn't get the notification, but see that other presence notifications are in fact coming in. So the next tool is WebChat. So in this configuration, you can choose your deployment, choose your queue, and populate all the custom chat data. So for the deployment, I'm going to use a version 2 WebChat widget, and I'm going to put the chat into my chat queue. And down here, instead of typing out and making up all this information, if you hit the Populate Fields button, we have a list of dummy data that loads in the site. And this is not real information, shouldn't be real phone numbers, not real people's names. So you can populate with different information just to get some different data coming through. You can fill in the 3 standard fields and add custom attributes as well. So if you wanted to add like account number, put in 1, 2, 3, 4. You can add more if you want. So this can simulate data that you would collect from your website and pass with the request so that you can test agent scripts or any post-processing actions you have. These custom attributes get set as the participant attributes on the chat. Down below, it gives you all the code you need for your website. So this gives you the script tag that you need to embed, and then gives you the configuration and the code to actually invoke the chat, so that you can copy and paste these things based on the configuration that you made up here. And when you add the custom attributes, they also show in that code below. So when you hit Start Chat, this pops up the web chat widget. It's populated with the information that I configured here. Because in the chat config, it is this is pre-populated, which is something that you can do when you integrate this into your website. If you know who the user is, you can pre-populate this chat with information. Otherwise, they're free to change their name and and any of the other information that they're allowed to change. When I hit Start Chat, we see that the chat has started, and now I'm waiting in queue. If I go on queue here, there's my chat with myself. So we can chat back and forth, testing the web chat here in the page, and we haven't written any code. So that's the web chat tool. We have the screen share configuration. So I don't have a screen share deployment configured in my org. So I'm not going to have, not going to be able to test this right now. But you can test the screen share from right here in the dev tools by configuring this information. And it, again, gives you the URL you need to do that in your own website. Callbacks, similar to the web chat, put in the required fields, choose your queue, and when you create the callback, it will create it in queue. You can add additional participant attributes here to simulate, again, creating this from your website or through your custom service to create callbacks. So the Analytics Query Builder, this is the other big feature in addition to the API Explorer. So the Analytics Query Builder supports these queries here: the conversation detail, conversation aggregate, queue observation, user status aggregate, user observation, and user detail queries. So you can select which one you want to do, and it tells you the API resource that you're making a request to. You get to choose your start time and end time, and so this just opens a picker here, so we can pick a different date. You can change the sort order by ascending or descending, what you want to order by, and then control the paging information as well. Then down below, this is the actual query designer part. So if we wanted to say, let's only show me conversations that have an end time. Actually, before I do that, I'll go ahead and run this query, execute query, and the results come back here. So we can see the conversations, shows us all the conversation data, a whole lot of JSON stuff here, so that you can read through and see exactly what you're going to get back before you build your application. We can try adding a conversation filter and say, we're going to say conversation end exists. So if you only want to find conversations that are completed, you can run this query. execute it, and we see the same results here. If we change it to not exists, that'll get only active conversations, which comes back blank because we don't have any. If we go back to WebChat, start another chat here. Oh, should probably choose a queue. There we go. Now, if I run this query again, we get a result back, and notice it does not have a conversation end. So this allows you to make live queries to the system. This is the exact same thing that your application will do, but you're doing it in a web page right here just to test stuff out. So particularly for analytics queries, since you need to build this in some sort of code when you're using the SDKs, or your application may need to build this, it's a lot easier to just push the buttons here in the web page and come up with the query that you want and test it here live, rather than go through the process of updating your application, building it, deploying it, going and testing it again, and doing that iteration cycle. This makes that much, much quicker. Some of the others, real quick, we can do user observation. When we execute this, it's going to give me an error because we need to put some stuff in here. So I'm going to go for, let's see, user ID, matches. And for certain things like users and queues, we can see the list. Actually, I don't think that's showing up in the screen share. But right now, the drop-down box is open, so I can select a user from the list. It populates it with the ID here, which is what the query requires. But the application shows you the list of users in this dropdown. That works for queues and media type as well, so that you don't have to go look up the ID of every user. So now if we execute the query, we get a result back and shows us what's going on. The next tool we have is the search query builder. Same basic idea as the analytics query builder, but for search. So we can build our query here, same general tool set, and then the result shows over here. The search didn't match anything, so no actual results. And this does support general search as well as suggest search. And the final tool that we have is the application inspector. So it loads up, we select the client that we want, and this can take several seconds to query it. This is looking through usage for whatever OAuth client you select, and then it populates here. So this tells us how many orgs have authenticated using this OAuth client, which this particular one, 15 orgs have used this OAuth client to authenticate, and 126 unique users have authenticated with this client. We see what scopes are required based on what's being used, and we only need user basic info for this. If there's any scopes that your application requests but is not using, they'll show here. This one will show you if you're requesting write access but you only need read access. It'll show that here so that you can optimize the scopes you're requesting. For those of you that are unfamiliar with scopes, the scopes is it's similar to like on your phone on iOS or Android. Whenever you install an app, it'll ask you, do you want to allow this app to have location access, or do you want to allow it to access your files or your camera or the microphone, things like that. In PureCloud, the scopes are related to PureCloud APIs and features, but it helps limit an application's scope of what it can do with the API. So that when you're installing applications, particularly from third-party sources, you know exactly what that app is going to be doing, what parts of the API it has access to, and that application will be unable to use APIs that require scopes that were not granted to it. So it's a limiting security feature. I believe right now it's still in public beta, so it hasn't been enabled for all orgs yet, but that's something that is coming in the future. The permissions, so what permissions your app needs to use the APIs it's using, and then what resources are actually used by the API in the last 7 days. This one, the only thing that this app does is request basic user info. So it uses the API v2 users me route. If it made any other API requests, they would show here as well. So that is the quick rundown of the developer tools. So definitely you guys should check these out if you haven't already. It's something that I personally use nearly every day. Any day I'm working on API stuff, I'm using the developer tools. We use it a whole lot internally. So developers on the API team, as well as developers on other teams that just want to test out the APIs that they've written, they can use this tool to test their own stuff, and it prevents them from having to write special applications just to do a quick check on their APIs. So very useful tools for a lot of us internally, and externally, we encourage you all to use them as well. We wrote them to save everybody time. So I think that's all I've got for today. If there's any questions, go ahead and type them in the chat, and we'll stick around for a little bit to get those answered.
Hey, Tim, we just got a question. Could you please provide an example use case for the search query?
Yes, let's do that. So the search query builder, you can search for a lot of different things. And actually, let's open the search documentation, take a look at that. All right, so there's several different search resources here. Not all of them are supported in the search builder. This only supports general search and suggest search right now. So some of the things that you might want to do, you can search for groups or users or voicemails. Users is a very common one. When you search for users, you may want to search by email address or phone number. So when you're actually using PureCloud, this up here, when you say, I want to find somebody named admin, this is using those search APIs. So if you want to find users in your organization by various different fields configured on that user, their name, their email, their phone numbers, you can search for that in here. So basically, any of the things you can search for, the use case is when you don't know the identifier of that, or particularly how to find it, and you don't want to look through a list, but you have a search term being any part of those fields that are available on those entities, and you can search for those. There's not any one specific use case for this, so it's kind of a nebulous answer as far as what are the use cases. But generically, if you want to find any of these things and you don't know the identifier, you can use search to find those. All right, we've got a question about IVR. Let's see. So there's a question about IVRs and flows. So IVR is a standard term in the industry, in the call center industry, meaning interactive voice response, and it's a generic term that refers to when you just use a phone to speak to a computer, basically. So a flow is a PureCloud specific term. So when you use Architect, the web application that allows you to design your IVR, Architect has the concept of a flow, and that's a particular configuration within Architect that allows a caller to flow through that, through any series of menus, data actions, user input, whatever you configure within Architect. The flow is just the segment of the IVR that they're participating in.
So, Tim, would you say that if I were to paraphrase that, that a flow, an IVR is basically like a way of connecting voice, but the flow is like the conditions of how we handle the IVR, or? Yeah,
I mean, an IVR is a generic term. It's like an IVR would be like calling a car or a truck or a van an automobile. an automobile is any number of types of things. An IVR can be any number of types of telephony systems. Architect and flows are just specific. It's our PureCloud specific terms for how we build IVRs. So they're not different things. It's just a generic term and a specific term.
Okay, I see. Sorry about that. It looks like we got a couple more of other questions.
Let's see. Okay, what means? Okay, are the same states and segments in the context of the conversation detail query? Okay, so let's go to the conversation detail query. And if we execute that, so I'm not sure what's meant by states. There's no states in here. But basically, I think maybe this is asking about the response, the conversation model. So the conversation model, one conversation represents multiple people, internal and external, interacting with various forms of media. There can be multiple forms of media in the same conversation. You'll see different participants and different sessions for those different people and different media types. So in the conversation, the high-level object for people is a participant. A participant may be an actual human being, an external human being, or an internal human being, being an agent or user. It can also be system participants, such as ACD or the IVR. So if we search for ACD, we'll see here's a participant with this ID, and the purpose is ACD. The participant name is chat because that's the name of the queue. So this tells you that this represents the segment where the conversation was being ACD routed. The session gives you the specific media interaction, tells you when that segment for this this person started and ended.
Hey, Tim. Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry. So another question was, I'm sorry if you already saw, but about about other tools that could be helpful for building integrations with PureCloud, like maybe Postman or.
Yeah, I don't use Postman basically ever. If I have to use some other API, maybe I might use Postman, but there's really no reason I have to use Postman over using the API Explorer. Postman does have features that the API Explorer does not, such as being able to run test suites and chain things together, and other just general API features. But for my day-to-day use, I don't have any reason to use Postman. I always use the API Explorer. As far as other tools go, not a whole lot that to help with PureCloud specific stuff. The dev tools really give me what I need for that. And then, when I actually write my code, I primarily use Visual Studio Code, and then our source control tools. But yeah, for interfacing with the API, the developer tools are the primary tool that I use for that. All right, another one about analytics. Oh, okay. So the question is about these states. These are the states that a segment can be in. That the actual behavior will be different based on the media type and what's actually happening. Is it a new call alerting? Is it a transfer? Is it a call? Is it a chat? Whatever it may be. So you'll see different patterns of states based on the media type and what's actually happening. But yes, these states are documented here. There's a question, will PureCloud support GraphQL? So we don't currently today. However, that is something that we are looking into for next year. It's not specifically targeted for development yet, but that is something that I have on my list personally to investigate and figure out if that's something that we want to offer or not. I think the default judgment is yes, we want to offer it unless we find a good reason that we shouldn't. So keep an eye out for more information about that next year. We have a question related to the billing API. There are two endpoints. One of them provides more details with the licenses and subscription the authorized organizations have. How can we get the same information but for our organization? So let me pop open the docs for that. All right, so these are the two billing APIs. One is for truster orgs and one is for your own org. They do provide slightly different information, and you cannot use the trustee one on your own org. That just doesn't work. That is something that I know somebody posted about that recently on the developer forum, and the answer is that you can't do that today. They are two different APIs that provide two different data, so there is a small gap. If you want this trustee type data for your own org, that's not currently possible. You can request that on our ideas site. So purecloud.ideas.aha.io. If you go there, it'll ask you to sign in, and then you can request ideas there. It's very useful to us whenever you request an idea and share your use case. Why is it you need this? What are you trying to do with it? Product management looks at that information and uses that to help prioritize features. And if somebody just says, hey, I want this, that carries a lot less weight than, hey, I want exactly this to do this, and here's why. If you share that use case with us, it's very helpful for prioritization. And so we can build a feature and take your specific use case into account.
I think that's probably gonna cover, or I can't even talk today. I think we're probably at the end of the QA session, unless anybody else has any last minute pressing questions. Otherwise, you guys are always welcome to shoot us an email or pop on the forum and ask your questions. Tim's got the developer forum showing up right now.
Mm-hmm. Yep. If you have any questions about APIs, integrations, any customizations like that, definitely come join us on the PureCloud Developer Forum, and we'll get those questions answered for you.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this last DevCast of the year. If you want to suggest a topic for us to go over, again, shoot us an email. We love the feedback because we are trying to cater the content to you. Again, we've had some problems. Well, anyway, we're going to be switching to Zoom next year, so look out for that. And thanks, Joe, and thanks everybody else for the compliment on the questions form. All right, have a great day, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.